Hello and welcome back to Careers at the End of the World. It's me, Jen, your host, and I'm calling this episode Resume Advice You're Not Going to Get Anywhere Else. This is like hyper work wonders careers, culture coded career advice, specifically resume advice. I want to talk today about through lines, hinges, and sponges, and what that has to do with your resume. I've been thinking a lot about through lines, hinges, and sponges because I've been talking about them as I've been working with clients for the last couple weeks. And I've been saying the same things over and over again, and I just thought, why not capture them somewhere and share a little bit about my thinking into resume content and why it can be helpful to take that content very seriously and how we do that over here. Before I dive in, I want to say that having a podcast is a lot of work. And lately, I have been getting emails and folks reaching out on various channels to let me know they're listening. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart if you have been one of those people. It really means a lot. Someone even asked about my show notes. So thank you for reading the show notes. It does take a lot of time to prepare those. And I'm like, I don't know if these are even useful. Is anyone using these? So thank you. That makes me feel good to know that the answer is at least someone's looking at the show notes. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your attention. And I'm grateful for your trust. If you haven't already, I'm going to ask for a favor. If you could leave a review, that would be amazing. That really helps get more eyeballs on the podcast. And that is something I am eyeballs is kind of a weird thing to get on a podcast. More ears on a podcast. That's something I'm actively working towards and trying to, devote more time over here. So if you have time, capacity, and you're enjoying the podcast, please consider leaving a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It would mean a lot. It would be a huge, huge boost, and I would really appreciate it. So thank you for listening. Let's talk about through lines, hinges, and sponges, and why they're important, and why thinking about these things, these concepts, is going to result in a better resume strategy for your job search. Let's start with through lines. Through lines in your resume. If you were to look at my resume, you go back to the first job that's on there, which at this point is not actually the first job I ever had out of college, but nonetheless, if you were to go back to the first job that's on my resume, to the current job, this one that's on my resume, there would be some through lines, right? There would be some clear connections from that job to this one, because that job is actually the job I had where I was doing a lot of hiring, right? You would be able to see where I learned a lot of the knowledge that I am applying now in the work that I do with clients. You would be able to see, oh, she has an interest in the hiring process. You'd also be able to see that I was a builder or fixer in almost all of my jobs. I know this will resonate with a lot of you. Like I either had to go in and establish systems that should have existed and didn't, or I had to fix the systems that were in place to make them work more optimally. That is another through line. Building and fixing systems, processes, programs, creating things that people want to engage in, which leads me to my third piece, which is this deeply relational component to my work. Collaboration, partnerships, client work. I wasn't working with clients when I was in the hiring process, but I was establishing relationships with candidates. I was working with hiring managers, working with hiring committees, right? So very relational skill set. Through lines are important on a resume because I think they help us connect to the parts of ourselves that are consistent. Working in hiring was not on my to-do list. So certainly having that job and then becoming a career coach, it really took me a long time to get to this particular role, which isn't one that you don't graduate high school and think I'm going to be a career coach, right? So you have a series of experiences at work, which really serve as learning experiences. You are learning about yourself and what's possible, and you're making decisions along the way based on that experience. And what I found really helpful for clients is for them to be able to connect the dots, to see those through lines, the threads of their work that are consistent, even if and when they're making a change, or if and when they feel like they're all over the place. If I ask some questions like, tell me about what you did in this first role and what did that look like in the second role, you can really pull out these strengths or values or areas of expertise that you've really built your career on. You will have these, in my experience, even if you've pivoted already. I spent a part of my career in research, not really doing hiring primarily, and I would still describe my work in very similar ways, minus the hiring part, right? I was still building things, I was still fixing things, and there's just a very relational component to social science research. So the content of the job might change, right? I might go from one kind of environment to another. But really how I'm functioning in those environments is pretty much identical. Through lines help people, job seekers, connect to their experience and stay grounded, right? To be able to identify like, oh, this isn't new for me. Like some of what I'm bringing forward has been there all along. It has this like very grounding effect. But the second piece, more externally, is that you can give yourself credit for skills and experiences, even if the literal job title isn't as helpful as you might think. You want to be connected to yourself and your experience as a job seeker. There's this tendency, especially when we're unhappy or in a hurry to get a job, to just be off to the races. But that through line can help you answer stories like, tell me about yourself, right? There can be a real clear narrative that you can distill around being able to identify how you've shown up consistently, even when the jobs have been different. And when you have that clarity, it's easier to communicate that clarity and that consistency to people who are looking to better understand your experience, who are looking to hear your story and understand it quickly. I don't think I've ever worked with anyone who didn't have some strong through lines in their experience. This is your origin story. I want you to really think, what were you doing? How were you functioning? How were you performing? What were you doing? And how has that been similar? Not the same, but similar as you venture through your career. A lot of the people that I work with are problem solvers. They like to resolve issues proactively in the moment. And so I think that for many people, something like problem solving is probably a very strong through line. I can look at, resumes and see that social justice is a very strong through line in their experience. Sometimes it's project management. It can be any combination of these things as well, right? Being able to thematically identify what you had when you started out that you're still holding on to, that still really matters to you, that is something you still want to leverage to some degree, I think is a really powerful way to start thinking about your narrative. So through lines, if you don't have them, think about them. The second concept here that I talk about a lot is hinges. What does a hinge do? It allows us to swing, right? Like it creates this momentum. I'm literally making this like movement with my hand where my wrist is the hinge. And so many professionals who are in transition are looking to make a hinge movement here, right? Like it's a matter of degrees that you are looking for a change. It doesn't actually matter how many degrees, in my opinion. You're looking to shift something, to move your career in a slightly different direction or a significantly different direction. And what I think about on a regular basis, and this is what makes this unique to Work Wonders, because I'm about to make up a word, is this Hingeable content that we're sharing on a resume? Is it doing the work of moving your career or your job search in the direction of your target jobs? Or is it really serving as the foundation for more of what you have done? Now, again, if you're not making much of a pivot, maybe you don't need to worry about Hingeable content. But for those of you looking for growth, for those of you looking for some kind of shift, change, transformation in your work, you are going to want to think about your resume content and ask, is it Hingeable? It's important to think about not just is the content of your resume and the text that's there accurately describing your work. That's step one. Step two is it serving the purpose of demonstrating your qualifications for the jobs that you want, for reinforcing your experience and transferable skills? For example, if the bullet points in your experience section, right? So you've got your most recent job and your bullet points there. If those bullet points are a description, or primarily a description of the type of work that you do, and you want to make a change, generally speaking, responsibilities are not that hingeable. Okay? They're not sort of catapulting you in the right direction. Responsibilities aren't ideal. Like, what we really want to be sharing there that will serve to sort of help nudge you in the right direction is impact. What is the result of the responsibilities that you've executed? What has it produced? What have you contributed to? What have you built? What have you improved? That's what we want bullet points to be conveying optimally. Now, two things on that. I'm a process-oriented person myself, and I work with a lot of people whose work is very process-oriented. I think some level of description that conveys that can be totally fine. I also think there's ways to communicate process-oriented work and talk about the impact that has, because in my experience, a good process leads to the best possible output. But I also want to say something really quickly about numbers and metrics. This is going to be a controversial take. It's not I'm not going to frame it controversially, because like, if you have really great metrics for your work experience, that's Hingeable, right? Like, people like to hire people who have an impact. And even if you're staying in the same line of work, having strong metrics is impactful. Like, it's impressive. Like, it makes a resume easy, fun, and exciting to read. Like, you can really tell the difference between a list of accomplishments and impact and results and a list of job responsibilities. When you're looking at two resumes who share information in each of those ways, one is infinitely more compelling to read than the other. However, the vast majority, I would say 90%, maybe more, of the people I talk to on a regular basis do not have any extensive calculations, metrics, numbers to really be using and capture their work in a quantitative way. So if that's you, I need you to know that not having metrics does not mean your work does not have impact. It does not mean your work doesn't matter or your work doesn't count. We can still convey results qualitatively, and I think that's very worthwhile. So I will often ask clients who don't have numbers, don't have metrics, what have you created? What have you improved? What have you reduced? What have you established? What have you streamlined, right? Like, use the words, the language of improvement, and paint a before and after of the work that you've done. And please know this as well. Nobody's going to give you permission to give yourself credit for this work. On a regular basis, I have to really level with clients and be like, it does sound like you have this experience. Actually, that's what sounds like. You're describing exactly what we're looking for, but they're just not giving themselves credit. It didn't work out perfectly. It's not perfectly executed. It's probably done better somewhere else. So much of what people don't want to talk about is just normal work stuff. Nothing works out perfectly. No one has perfect results. You do have to give yourself permission to maximize your experience and contributions and position them on your resume in the most impactful way, because that will make them Hingeable. It will give you the most room for growth, room for change, room for evolution if you position your work in that way. This is the language of transferable skills. This is meeting the reader and the hiring stakeholders where they're at. This is about communicating your attunement for what they're looking for. Hingeable resume content is about what you've done, where you're going, and positioning that maximizes your opportunity to propel yourself forward. Sponges are important here too. And I think sponges help create Hingeable content. Let me explain. One of my favorite things to do when a client wants to change industries or functions is to go into their resume and delete every single reference to their current industry or current function and edit that bullet point so that it actually doesn't need that information. And this is much easier to do than people realize. I call that like an industry agnostic resume. The sponge is the visual here. We are wringing that sponge dry. And in this case, the sponge is your resume. And instead of water, it's experience that isn't going to be necessary moving forward. We're just wringing it out. We can do that in your cover letter. We can do it in LinkedIn, but I really think your resume is the most powerful place to do it because that's definitely what people are looking at. So if you are in a job search where some of your prior experience is less relevant, less helpful, less necessary, consider removing it. Consider culling it away. Okay? Snip, snip, snip. Like I've said, writing a resume is often as much about writing as it is about deleting. It can be difficult to get people to part with very important experience, like formative experience. But again, I always defer to the target roles. What do they look like? You know, if you've been in the insurance industry for 15 years and you want to leave, then we don't need to double down on the insurance piece, right? The insurance might be a through line in your career so far, but if it's not going to be going forward, we don't need to double down on it. We don't need to overemphasize it. We can really think about where we're going and how to run your existing resume content through a machine, except the machine is my brain, that magically turns it into content that's better for other kinds of jobs, repositions it, emphasizes things differently. And pretty much everyone can do this to some degree. I think about this also as like translation. If you've been insurance, but you want to go into healthcare, like you want to think about the language, the tone, the level of detail. What are the qualifications on the healthcare jobs that you're looking at? And how can you demonstrate that and reposition the experience section so that you are not reminding people constantly that you're an outsider, but you're demonstrating that you have the skills and experience to execute a job in a different industry. This is something that requires some time. It requires some effort. It requires some thinking. It's rare that this is something that you just like snap your fingers and like no problem. You've got another version of your resume that's completely wrung dry of irrelevant experience and has all Hingeable content. Like I often say about a lot of our resume work, it is upfront work. Doing this work upfront, starting with a clear sense of your strengths and values that have gotten you from point A to point B, and learning how to consolidate that story, learning how to reposition your work so that it resonates with people across your target jobs, and wringing out that experience that just isn't necessary anymore. Whether that's just based in years of experience, like that might be the case. It might be time to not have every job you've ever had on your resume, or it may be about honoring your goal to switch industries and deleting as much industry jargon that just isn't going to help you in the future. This is really what good resume writing and strategy is about. It is about thinking about these pieces deeply. These are conversations I have with people as we're working on their resume all the time. Every week, I'm talking about these concepts. It's my belief that not only should your resume help you land interviews, okay? It should help you at every milestone in your job search. It should help you feel confident talking about yourself when you're networking. It should help you feel more confident and prepared for interviews. If you're taking your resume seriously, if you are curating your narrative and learning how to do that based on your target job, it should do more than help you land interviews. It should be an opportunity to excavate your experience and put it back together in a way that's going to serve you going forward. And if you're listening and you're struggling to do that on your own, there is still space on my calendar for our Mercury retrograde Resonate resume writing service special. So you can take $100 off any of our resume writing services this month, anything from a strategy session with me to a done for you version of your resume that I will write myself. I will add these links to the show note along with the directions to book and the discount code. I would love to look at your target jobs and see where there's room for improvement and help you connect these dots and pull together a narrative that is going to be helpful and authentic and easier to deliver as you navigate your job search. So reach out, book in if there's anything I can do. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can find me on Instagram. You can hit reply if you are on our email list, also called Careers at the End of the World. Don't hesitate to be in touch if you have more questions or thoughts on anything you hear in any of these episodes. I always love hearing from you. All right, have a great week.